Welcome. It's good to have everyone here. It's really my pleasure on behalf of Nicola Austin to introduce Professor Gail Gillon to you, who's going to talk to us about the Better Start the National Health Science Challenge, and also Kathleen Liberty, who's here. So it's great to have you both here today at the Child and Youth Forum, and it's great to have such strong connections with the university and hear what's happening about the research. You'll have seen from Gail's profile that she's had extensive work internationally and nationally, and the work that she does and the research that she does. So we're very privileged to have you here. Thank you. So I'm just going to let you something like we had. I'm going to apologise for Pat, we couldn't get in this and then we couldn't set up for you soon. So my apologies to people. Good. Tēnā koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, i tēnā rā. Well, thank you for the invitation to talk. I love talking about the National Science Challenge and the research work we're doing. So it's a great pleasure to be here to talk to you about the early stages of our research. So thank you very much for the invitation. What I thought I would start with is just outlining a little bit about the challenge as a whole. So you'll be aware that the government's funded 11 national science challenges. This is the only one really focused on young children's development, and it's called A Better Start, I tepu I ria, which means to grow and branch forth. And the directorate is a three-way directorate with the director Professor Wayne Cupfield from Auckland University and the Liggins Institute, and then myself and Barry Taylor from, of course, Otago University as co-directors, and we have a very extensive research team. And there are, Professor Angus McFarlane from the University of Canterbury is leading our Vision Mātou Rongo Māori strategy, along with our Kāhui, Māori advisory group, led by Helen Mawaka Barnes from the University from Massey University. So the mission for the challenge as a whole, this is a 10-year program of research, of which we are funded for the first 5, and subject to all sorts of, as you could imagine, KPIs and lots of measures to report against, and then will be reviewed for the second 5-year tranche. This was launched by Minister Joyce at the beginning of last year, so we're into our second year, but somehow that's actually almost counting as our 3rd year. So we sort of started before we got the funding, as you can imagine these things kind of do. So we're on catch-up mode, but going very well so far. And there are 4 main themes really to this Better Start Challenge. One is focused around the prevention and prediction of obesity. One is focused around the prediction and prevention and intervention for children with at risk for early learning difficulties, and particularly focused around literacy as a measure of their early learning success. One focused around adolescent mental health, led by Sally Merry from the University of Auckland. And then what we call the big data, looking at how we can use big data through the integrated data system. And if we've got our sound going now, we might just try a little clip from the launch, which just gives you a very high-level sense from Minister Joyce and the launch day around what the challenge is focused on. So we'll see how we go with. Caught up here now. Playing this.
Government has approved $35 million over 10 years for this challenge. Areas like childhood obesity, improving literacy of children in school early, and helping children with mental health challenges. This is a massively important piece of work, drawing together all the cleverest minds across New Zealand from the different disciplines, and trying to find linkages and insights we haven't found before.
The benefits of investing in children are utterly enormous. Every science dollar invested to improve the health, well-being, education of our children has an effect that won't last a few years, that won't last a couple of decades. We're talking about investment that will create a return that will last 60 to 80 years. That is absolutely enormous.
Literacy, mental health and obesity. These are three concerns that we wrestle with every day in our community. So we're ecstatic that you're here.
The question goes to me, what's important to the young people of this community? Health and education.
What's particularly new about the science is the cross-disciplinary nature of it. The fact that we'll have the epidemiologists working with clinicians, working with the educationists all together. And that's already happening in terms of bringing this platform together.
A third of our children are overweight or obese. A third will have a mental health problem by the time they're 18. And a third will fail school literacy requirements in the first year of school.
We really have to get at these kind of questions, and one of the reasons we want to do this from Māori Pacific is we want to understand what it looks like from their side of the fence.
A child's early success in literacy is so vital to their education success and healthy well-being.
Over the last few decades, we've realised how common mental health problems are. And without mental health, it makes it very difficult for young people to get off to a good start.
Big data is actually collected. It's using the information that we've got tons of across the country, but never connecting it up.
The team is very excited about the potential to have Māori ways of carrying out interventions, Māori ways of informing the professionals who are involved.
Right, so that's just the big picture. Give you a bit of an overview. So I'm going to come now and narrow down onto the theme that we're leading here in Christchurch and at the University of Canterbury, involved very closely with Jan Dobson and the wellbeing in the Linwood community. And we're looking at how culturally responsive interventions that really braid together effective practices in education and health can lead to more successful early literacy outcomes and wellbeing for some of our children that we know are coming into school with risk factors associated with risk factors for early learning success. And this theme has 4 projects within it. The couple I'm going to talk to today a little bit about study 1, but we'll focus in on study 2. The first study is looking at predicting those early literacy success factors, looking at the big data. We're looking at the before school check data and relationships with the need for early intervention by 6, 7, 8 years of age. Looking at also the Pacific Island families data that Philip Schluter is leading with the Pacific Island family team from AUT University. The intervention study that's just started this week in the Linwood schools, we're looking at the first, a tiered model, looking at evidence-based effective literacy instruction in the classroom, and then moving down to those that are struggling to respond to that to a small group and then individual level. Professor Nikki Davis is leading the, and Una Cunningham, looking at emerging bilingualism and how we're using digital technologies and what's in preschool and school environments to help facilitate the emergence of bilingual development in children as they move from preschool into school, because we know that it's typically a big drop-off area where children who may have been using 2 languages often drop that away when they come into school. And we're also particularly interested in the cohort that we're looking at with children with developmental disabilities, particularly autism spectrum disorder, dyspraxia of speech, and at risk for dyslexia. So as I said, there's a very big research team. These are our researchers here in Christchurch looking at this, Christchurch Dunedin, looking at this, these 4 projects, which is called a pilot project. It seems very big to me for a pilot project, but it is just a pilot part of the project to roll out in other communities once we learn from our successes here. We also are working strongly with our community in the Linwood hui. Jan Dobson has been amazing pulling us all together and setting the context for working within the communities. In Linwood, we have all the schools involved in the intervention, so we're looking across that community of learning, and we've had a number of the preschool and early learning centres involved. that was just some photos taken from Saili. There in the front is just our Pacifica PhD student who has joined us, and we had a wonderful celebration. She was awarded one of the Better Start scholarships to join the team just a couple of months ago. So why are we focused on early literacy success as a marker, and how does it link to some of the projects? We know obviously that strong oral language skills are very highly predictive of early reading success, and in turn early reading success is the strongest predictor of later reading success, which feeds in very strongly to indicators of healthy well-being through educational achievement. So in our current model in New Zealand, we have the model where the children come into school, we wait really for them to fall behind their peers in early literacy, and then we put the intervention in year 2, which is, of course, the main intervention at the moment is reading recovery. So we want to change that because we don't want to see these children waiting a year to fall behind their peers in literacy. We know we have some very strong indicators of why they might be at risk, and we want to see more systematic instruction that would help facilitate better outcomes for the end of year 1. And the data that we have nationally from the national standards data is showing us that we're actually not getting much change currently in improving early literacy success. After the first year of school, we get around about a 65% success rate of children that can read very simple little readers. We do see that step up after year 2 to around close to 80%. So that might suggest either some developmental progress or the effects of interventions that are taking place. But then we get this consistent 20% of children who are not achieving in their literacy. And by going into secondary after 8 years of primary school, that even starts to increase. It's over 20% of children are not reaching the levels they need. So we know we need to be doing something different. If we just keep doing the same things, as you can see, this has been quite a consistent pattern year after year, that the same groups that I'm sure many of you are working with, you will see them struggling in their early literacy. So that's why we are focused on a major initiative to try and change that pattern. And of course we know that Māori and Pacifica are more likely to be falling behind in their literacy than other groups. So children who identify as Māori or Pacifica in their reading, we get less than around 66%. This is across the primary years, so not just in year 1, but across the primary years on average, compared to around that 80% in Asian or European. So Māori and Pacifica are falling behind, and we see that in the PISA, the big studies, PEARLS and PISA at 10 and 15 years of age, that actually the disparity between our high achieving readers and our low achieving readers is one of the highest variances in the world, in the OECD. We have a huge disparity between some of our top readers are top in the world, they're in that top group. We have about 14% at 10 years of age who are in the top, but we have this long tail who are really underachieving, and that difference compared to other countries is remarkably large, and so that's what we need to be reducing, that inequality that we're seeing at quite a young age, so that we get better outcomes later down the track. And just for those that might not be familiar with what are we expecting our 6-year-olds to do by the end of the first year of school, we're expecting them to be able to read and understand a simple text like this. So this would characterise a text that would say they can meet standards, where you've got lots of picture cues, you've often got a repetition, you've got simple words and vocabulary coming through, and we'd expect them to be able to read these types of texts and to comprehend them. So it's, after a year of school, I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that's a reasonable goal. I don't think we've set the standard so high that we've got an issue. So that's kind of what we're talking about in this frame for what we're expecting after a year of school. So our project aims, we've got a 5 or 6 key main aims, looking at because we don't have a systematic way of screening for literacy currently come into school across the country, yet we do know there are some very strong predictors. And one of the measures we're really interested in, where my research has focused a lot on over the years, is what we call phonological awareness, children's ability to understand the sound structure of words and to be consciously aware of the first sound in a word or the last sound or how many sounds are in a simple word. That is the single strongest predictor from 5 years of age through to 6 years of age for early reading. It's a very simple measure, and we're introducing online assessments through this program where we could do that much more systematically to get some information about that. Then, of course, once you identify that risk, you've got to ensure the classroom instruction is going to facilitate and develop those skills. So the intervention is focused on systematic instruction and phonological awareness combined with vocabulary, because vocabulary measures are very strongly associated with ability to comprehend text, whereas phonological awareness is very strongly associated with decoding the text, which in turn will help their comprehension. So those two measures together should give us a strong result. We are looking at key factors that help develop simultaneous bilingualism and the benefits young children have from developing bilingual language development and bilingual literacy development. We're looking at how we can, and this is one of the longer term goals, looking at managing successful health outcomes that might be interfering with their early literacy, and that's why we're particularly interested in the before school check data and how we may, looking down the track at a case study of sharing data across education and health so that we can use some of that data in ethically and safe ways for families to improve outcomes. And then the efficacy of the larger scale intervention. So our very first, this talk's just about a month too early to present some data from the before school check, but I could just give you a little bit of highlight because we've just right at this stage analysing our first big data set. So we've looked at a cohort of data from the before school health check of around 56,000 children in the integrated data. And we're looking at that data that's in the system, which indicates whether the children from when they're 6, 7 and 8 are having literacy intervention, if it's been recorded as a literacy intervention. So it's quite, we haven't got detailed data in literacy in the integrated data set, but we have got an indication whether they would receive it. So what we're seeing here is that, for example, children who would have had their before school health check by 2013, so if they were 4 then, in 2016 they're coming into year 2 or year 3, and around 5,600 of those had been indicated as having a literacy check. So these ones are just coming into school, so too early to tell. And of those, as you can see, many more are boys. So 63% are boys, in this case 36% are girls. And we're breaking that down by a number of factors, but that's just to show you what we're starting to look at right now. We're looking at that before school health check at 4 and what is associated with literacy interventions. And Dr. Rick Ados and Jesse from Otago University are working very closely with us here. They're leading the analysis of this data set, and we're working on presenting this soon, but it's just a bit too early to be able to present the detail. But just because I knew I've whet your appetite, I'd have to tell you something. What the preliminary analysis that we're starting to look at, which is not yet to be validated, but certainly the parents, the PEDS, the Parents Evaluation of Developmental Status, where they're indicating at 4 that they've got 2 or more concerns. Many more of those children are coming through into the literacy intervention. From the Strengths and Difficulty questionnaire from the teacher's version, where they're indicating hyperactivity and conduct problems, we're seeing many more of those in the literacy intervention. Either audio or visual referral is another red flag, which we would expect, particularly if both ears or both eyes are coming through. And there is, which is probably a range of other factors associated, but children identified as BMI in the obese or extremely obese range are also more likely to have had a literacy intervention. So, as I say, I will take that as very preliminary, because you'll need to invite me back in a couple of months and I can give you the confirmed results, because we're just writing this up. But certainly seeing some usefulness here in the data that's coming through, and we're keen to explore that further. Now, for the intervention study that's just started this term, so through Jan and Karen Wilson and Foy from the Ministry of Education, their leadership and supporting us to become involved with all of the Linwood community schools, we have what we're calling a delayed intervention design study. So we have 3 schools who have randomly been selected to receive the intervention this term, and then the other 4 schools will receive the intervention next term, so that will have all received it by the end of the year, and that's what we're describing as Tier 1. This is systematic, evidence-based classroom instruction implemented by the class teacher, very much focused on developing these children's phonological awareness and early vocabulary as part of their literacy program. And the children that we screened all of the children coming into these schools, or who were currently in Year 1 within the last, who'd come into Year 1 within the last 4 or 5 months. We've used as a screener our phonological awareness online assessment, which is like a fun type activity that children can do online. With the clinical evaluation of language fundamentals, the New Zealand version that we were involved in critiquing, looking at memory recall, which was also associated with their semantic and syntactic knowledge, and then their expressive vocabulary. So those were simple screening tasks for all these children. We screened 268 children across those 7 schools, of which 170 came up as having some issues on those tests and warranted in-depth assessment. So really indicating quite a high number having some underlying oral language skills within those early months at school or coming into school with those issues that would place them at risk. So we've now done, just completed the comprehensive assessment to identify, we're getting 3 subgroups from the screening: those that were just struggling on phonological awareness only, those that were just struggling on language only, and those that had both oral language and phonological awareness problems. And from there, the in-depth assessments that we've now done over 3 sessions, we've looked at more depth at their oral language. We're assessing, we're doing some pre-intervention assessment probes around how well they will learn the words that were involved in the intervention and control words. We're looking at other aspects of their semantic and syntactic development and their word structure. So we're getting them to retell a story, so we can look at just their expressive language and analysing that through what we call the systematic analysis of language transcripts, a computer program that can give us all sorts of data, like how many different words did they use, how many pronouns did they use, what was their word length. So we have a very rich database of them just talking, using their own language in English at this stage. We will now go back for those that are emerging bilingual and look at their competencies in another language as well. And then their phonological awareness measures. So that's the in-depth assessment we're collecting from these children prior to their intervention. And we also have a questionnaire that Sonia McFarlane has been leading and will be working with our families in the community to engage them in completing a questionnaire focused on four aspects, really: gathering more information about their current health status and how the parents see that, but particularly focused on their language environment, so focused on their reading together, reading practices, positive identities, which talks about their involvement in language learning, if they have other languages, practices in the home that would help them build a positive identity. So that's about to be rolled out this term as well. We're just piloting the questionnaire with some families just to get their feedback, but we've had quite a lot of iterations with the research team, and we are about to come in to the schools that we're working in to engage with those families to complete the questionnaire. And we're also, as I mentioned, looking for children within that cohort who have particular disabilities, and at the moment we're identifying at least 52 with some type of specific speech difficulty, and 3 that have had some flag, and looking into whether that's been formally diagnosed around ASD. These will become case studies within it because we're really interested to see how they're progressing, what sorts of supports they're receiving, how they're responding to the class intervention, what additional supports they need to get engaged with their literacy learning. And the intervention itself, we've designed it based on previous studies that we've done here in Christchurch. One of my former PhD students, Dr. Karen Carson, who now has a position in Australia, we did a trial here in the Shirley community a few years back, where we looked at much more structured and systematic evidence-based classroom instruction around phonological awareness. And we found from that pilot study that the schools that implemented the more structured approach, by the end of year 1, 6% of their children needed to go on and have additional literacy support, compared to 26% in the schools that just continued with their regular literacy instruction. So a huge shift from implementing a much more structured approach to phonological awareness. So, however, in that project we did find those that had weaker oral language skills needed much more support in transferring those new skills to the reading and writing process, which of course is the aim of phonological awareness intervention, that they will use those cues to help them decode and to help them understand words in print. So we knew from that those at particular risk still struggle. So in this intervention we've taken that into account and planned additional activities. But we're based it on that model, so it's for one school term. It's 30-minute sessions conducted 4 times a week. So it fits into the teachers' literacy program, which they do usually every day. This time we are integrating vocabulary with phonological awareness and tying it very much to the Māori concepts that are being introduced into the Year 1 classrooms around core concepts like manaakitanga and whanaungatanga, and choosing storybooks to develop their language and their phonological awareness around those core themes. So this, as I say, is a pilot. We wanted, we worked very closely with the teachers in the design, so that we want something that as soon as the research team goes away, they just say, oh yeah, well that was interesting, that worked well, we had all this research support, but now we're on our own, we'll go back to what we used to do, because that sometimes can happen after intervention studies. So that's why we've been very conscious of getting their feedback, getting their ideas into the intervention, what would work for them on an ongoing basis, and also getting them to plan. So it's not, so we prepare 3 of the lessons a week, and they have to transfer and plan one themselves for the first 8 weeks, and the last 2 weeks they completely plan. So we're trying to get that transfer of knowledge from, you know, just pulling the program off the shelf to integrating into their classroom practice. We've focused it on really evidence-based instruction around phonological awareness that we've built up over a number of years, and the same with our vocabulary. Simple things. It turns out with vocabulary development, very simple things when parents are reading to children or teachers are reading to children, if they stop it, pause after they've read a more difficult word and simply define it or describe it, that has quite a significant effect on whether they can recall those words and use those words. So they're not difficult strategies. The same with phonological awareness. You know, simply bringing children's attention explicitly to the first sound they can hear in a word, listening for sounds they hear in a word, has an enormous impact on whether they can decode words. So these strategies are actually really simple, but the key is what we would term in a research sense, the dosage. You know, you've got to do it systematically, intensively to get an effect. And that's what sometimes breaks down in a busy classroom, because those that are moving on won't need anywhere near the dosage, so they might have a little bit of exposure to it and be fine. But those at much more risk need to have it more intensively and more explicitly to pick those skills up. So it's not like we've had to dream up something completely different. It is really just about the implementation and obviously engaging activities that will really engage the children in the stories. As I mentioned, each theme is around a storybook, so we're using a naturalistic context, something teachers do all the time, which is share books with children, and using those stories to build their phonological awareness and their vocabulary around core themes. There's also quite a bit of professional development built in for the teachers. We're involving our speech language therapists in the community and our resource teachers for learning and behaviour to support as we go through the program. The speech language therapists will be involved in supporting teachers or children that have got particular speech and language difficulties in their classrooms, and adapting the activities to be suitable for those children. We're just currently about to meet with our RTLBs around implementing some parent workshops based on what we've done at the preschool last year. Preschool workshops, we're extending those to parents in the community and getting RTLBs involved in those workshops and working with the parents, and then potentially in the smaller group activities that will follow the classroom level. So looking for all the resources we can use within the community, because again, if we want to upscale to other communities, we can't just come in as a research team with a whole lot of extra money that just works while you've got the research funding. It's about how do we use the resources within the community to support these developments and things that they're currently doing. So I might pause there. The website for Better Start, which we do update with the other projects, of course. If you're interested in the obesity projects or the adolescent mental health projects, you'll find out some more information about them on our website. But just open up if there are any questions. Kia ora. Go for it, Melissa.
Hi, I just wondered what the impact of those modern learning environments is on the learning, because I haven't seen the research that shows that that's better for literacy. My child can read quite well, she's 8, but she writes her letters from the bottom up. In the big classrooms, no one ever has time, and the word is that they don't really mind as long as they appear to be meeting the things, that they're using the right processes. So what is the impact of that in your view?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and it's certainly in an area that needs much more research. So we do have Nikki Davis looking at how digital technologies are used, because these innovative learning environments typically are more digitally enhanced, so they're using a lot of different technologies to be able to work in small groups and work in different ways. But I would say that it is an area that needs a lot more research. What we're interested in, and it has been quite difficult from a research perspective, because of course you haven't always got this is your standard classroom and you do your thing. So the crossover, because they work in groups and bring children into different groups and cross over the schools, is something we've had to factor into the design. So we'll certainly be able to have a look at that. But typically for literacy, they will be grouping the children in different ways to work on their early literacy. But the impact of noise, distraction, other activities, I think it's a massive project across New Zealand. I think it's quite, with Minister Kay now, she's been a very strong advocate for the innovative learning environments and the digitally enhanced environments. But yes, it does need to be, it would have been great to have had more research on some pilots to really be well informed, and it's certainly an area that needs that research to see the impact.
Because I'd be interested to know if some of your classrooms are the traditional ones and some of the modern ones, if you use your techniques, what the differences in the outcomes are, because you would think a really large noisy room isn't as great for people with the needs.
Yes. Yeah, and that's where we're particularly interested in some of these case studies with very high needs children, to look at how they're coping with those sorts of environments. We have had the opportunity, we will have the opportunity, I'm hoping, to move into Hiaita campus, which is perhaps an extreme version of that. But because I've just started this year, we thought it was way too scary for them to say, here we are, we've got the big research team, we're watching you. So we are letting them, just settle in. But they're keen to work with us, and we're particularly interested in the data sharing that they're looking at the moment around a project with looking at integrating systems, so that if we were able to integrate health and education, what that would look like. So we are very keen to do some research with them.
Thanks, Gail.
Yeah.
What a huge project that there's so many prongs to it, and it's great to see too that sort of project where there's a lot of stuff embedded about engagement with each of the communities, because that buy-in is really, really important. One observation is that those schools are all very low decile schools, where performance is, as your data showed, is going to be low anyway, so any gains from anything is going to be higher than what you might expect across the kind of broader spectrum of society. So there's two parts of my question. Are you planning to follow this up with a more of a sort of a mixed demographic, mixed decile, to use such a blunt sort of category, in future studies? And two, what's your fidelity checks for the interventions? Because, as you said, teachers do all sorts of things in their classroom and have all sorts of intentions, but what's the fidelity check about the sort of, just say, the level of dosage that the kids are actually getting in the studies?
Yeah, really great questions. The second one, the first one around, yes, this is a pilot that we want to extend then to other communities. So learning from this. This challenge needs to be focused on the most vulnerable children, so the whole challenge is set up to look at children at particular risk. So the second phase will be actually in areas of South Auckland. They were very keen for us just to go to Auckland to start with, and we said, no, we'd like to try this in Christchurch. So there will be probably another trial of a community at high risk, because that's where they want to see the change, and knowing that our current processes are not having the same impact for those children. But following that, so for the second phase of the research, it would then be to extend it to a much broader community base in terms of mixed, children with different needs. We know from probably other research that children that come into school with less of an oral language issue will still benefit from the program, but don't need it as much. So actually, if you're exposed to a lot of language and books and reading, a lot of these early phonological awareness skills and vocabulary skills with the current instruction, so any more shared reading will work. So it's those that need it the most that do come into school at higher risk because of poor oral language that our current curriculum isn't necessarily addressing. The second question around treatment fidelity. Yes, so we're very connected via LearnSight. So all of our teachers have, with their professional development, linked into our university LearnSight. So each day they have to complete a checklist that we can monitor online of what activities they've completed for that day. Then we audio record. We would have liked to video record, and we might be able to work up to that, but they're a little shy to start with. But they're happy for us to audio record every one session a week, so that we can give feedback directly on what we're hearing. And we'll get their feedback on that. We initially said, we'd like to come in and record you first before we start and video you so we can see your and then we'd like to... No. We wanted to test their own phonological awareness knowledge, and they said, no, Gail. So we've just had to back a bit on that. And that one, it's the benefit of the huge benefits of working very closely with community and designing research. But then the downside are your perfect model of tick this and tick that sort of goes out the window, and you have to rethink how you can get things like fidelity. The other support is really we're going to be looking for our speech language therapists, because they're already involved in the community, they're known to the schools, and will come in to observe some of those sessions also there to support the children with particular speech and language needs, but we'll also be able to do some of that coaching and mentoring work with the teachers around the program. Halfway through the program, we take a pause and have a workshop where we're really analysing what's happening, what's working, what's not, and helping them keep on track for the second part, because sometimes you do get that effect. You start the research, you're very diligent, and then as the weeks go on, you kind of fall back a bit. So we've got that prompt as well. Nicola.
I'm interested in our research, we've found maternal education, but as a key part of the social risk, as an impact, particularly on literacy, but on learning and education achievement. How are you going to address that variability and those key confounders?
Yes. So you're right, mother's level of education often is one of the very strong predictor, although we do see that measures of phonological awareness are stronger than that on their early literacy. So that's why but the model we're looking at is really, we've looked at Angus's work around the braided rivers approach, but also models of early reading that do talk about three different domains, one being the cognitive with the phonological awareness, but certainly one being the psychological and one being the ecological. And so looking at those three aspects. With the parents' level of education, we're hoping through the parent questionnaire we will gather some data so we can look at that for our cohort of children that we're particularly interested in. We'd also like to what we found with the preschool work was involving the parents in workshops. Interestingly, that was very successful, but some of the parents really had never really read with their children and shared stories, and they really enjoyed it. But the work it took to get those parents engaged and to monitor that was really unsustainable. So we're looking at that aspect because from the research we were texting, we were calling, we were engaging, we ran workshops morning, noon and night, we had Kai, we had babysitting, we had everything possible. But it took, and so we did get really good engagement. We ran 2 workshops focusing on those parenting skills of sharing stories and building language. But as I say, it was very, very intensive to do that. And so in this school one, we're looking at getting input from the RTLBs and the community around what do we think would work best. When do parents do engage with school? Another reason we're focused on year 1 is that typically is where you are more likely to get the best engagement as they start, when they're keen, they're engaged, as opposed to, already by 2 or 3 years, parents might have had negative experiences or finding that challenging. So that was another reason to start at that point there. But it's a good point, and hopefully we will collect some of that data through parent questionnaires.
I think my question probably relates to that previous one. Thank you, by the way. It was fascinating to hear about your research and especially about your use of data. I noticed from the data that you presented that it was almost all data about individual children and then the interventions themselves. I'm wondering if you're also able to collect data that might describe characteristics of the school or the curriculum or the learning environment in addition to what you've got?
Yes, well, in the context, because we're working over that community of learning, we are also, we've spent probably a year within that community before we've started this. So we haven't got a systematic way, if you like. We're just describing that community around what's happening. We've certainly got information from the teachers around their usual literacy practices that will also, and talking back to the types of learning environments, so that will all be part of the description of that work. But it's a good point. We need to be thinking about collecting that other data. We're mostly on the parent questionnaire, it's focused on their home learning experiences and their health status rather than outside of the community. But because we're in that community, I think we've probably got opportunity to be able to describe some of those things in more depth.
Thank you, it's a great piece of work, and this isn't directly related to the Better Start Challenge, but do you have any hunches about how because we know that sort of understanding rhyme and all of those sorts of things are part of those home-based things that happen for phonological awareness. Did you have any, you know how you were saying that you've tried so hard to engage with families to try and increase that. Do you have any hunches about how we might go about it in the future as that other prong of supporting literacy?
Yes. I mean, the campaigns around just spending time talking with children are just so vital in some of it, because you're right, just hearing language, talking to language, being engaged in some of those what we might call now historical or traditional rhyming games and stories and rhyming stories are really important for that early development. And so what we know about phonological awareness is that the very early stages of that come from children extending their vocabularies, because when you start off learning vocabulary, children might learn them as isolated words, as like a complete soundbite. But then as it extends, that's too inefficient. So the brain then works out, well, wait a minute, I'm hearing these sounds and I'm hearing these sounds, and I can put them together and form new words. And so unconsciously, they're already becoming aware that words are made up of sounds and they can be broken up to form new words. Now, if that stage doesn't really happen because their vocabulary remains so limited, then it already puts them back on their ability to become that very early awareness of phonological awareness, which will then grow and develop very quickly with language exposure.
It feels like it should. You know how, thinking about what Nicola was thinking about maternal education level and how, and one of the aspects of my job, I talk to parents about how they felt about school themselves and things, but it's a bit like we could take a step back, from that, and it doesn't need to be something about how parents feel about their own learning outcomes and things, because they can be supporting reading by supporting language, but it's so complex and hard, isn't it? Yeah. Well, no, it's easy at one level, but it's hard to make the change. So.
That's right. I mean, for young baby, the simple act of every time you're doing something with your baby, talking, and as they're changing nappies, as anything, just talking and using language so that the child is hearing language. But yes, we use lots of different techniques, because the research also does show that, just sitting down sharing a book is great, step one. Of course, we would encourage that. But actually, you can get a much bigger shift if they talk about the stories and if they extend the vocabulary, if they're talking about some of the sounds and words, that's when you'll get even a bigger shift. So the advantage of encouraging parents to use strategies we know that will give maximum benefit is also where you might be able to accelerate as opposed to just maintaining, because for some of these children we do indeed need to accelerate because they're so far behind. So it's those sorts of strategies we're very interested in as well.
Gail, I can't help but wondering about, turning the TV off and split shift casual contracts and the impact that has on those types of activities. And I know that's getting kind of those many steps removed, but that's the context of these parents in this demographic and the kids that aren't thriving,
Yeah.
Average of 6 hours a day, when you're going to read a book when the TV's on for that long.
I know, and it's what possibly to what they're engaging with and what they're watching. So that's where Nikki's work is particularly focused, because there are good uses of technology and there are bad uses of technology, and understanding the benefits of the good uses of it and how we can be facilitating that. But yes, just having a blank, a screen that's just no interaction is not a program that's encouraging interaction, which some do very well, and that would have more of a benefit than ones that don't. So it's all of those things, but I know it's a tough job.
It also comes down to the ability to be able to afford a book in the first place, and a lot of families don't and can't, or access libraries.
Yeah, and that's part of the bigger projects too, looking at, as we move through, how do you use those resources in the community to support those things, and the programs that are able to support your books and things. But huge issues, huge issues, and I think it's great that we're able to look at a community here in Christchurch that is bringing a lot of community resource together, thinking, having these conversations I do think we're more advanced than some other communities around the country that haven't had as many of these sharing conversations that have been happening in Linwood about coming together as a community to support families. And we want to try and capture some of that within this case study that we're working on.
Just a very quick wind-up question, because I know you want to go. Is this a signal to health and education working together much more down the track as well?
That would certainly be my vision. Well, I was thrilled when I seen they've moved into the one building, health and education in the same building in town here in Christchurch. I thought, now that's at least bringing proximity. But yes, we really need to, from my point of view, unless we do that, we're not going to get the step up that we need. Very strong on that.
So just to let you know, we're looking at developing a group to talk together at secondary school level of health and education working together.
And we're probably one of the few colleges in the country that put health and education together. That's also a good start, because you've got to get the professionals talking before they even come out. And that's been amazingly silent. So we're working on it. Kia ora everyone, thank you.
Really fascinating. I think we could have talked for a lot longer than we did. I think people have raised their interesting points that it's quite cross-sectorial, and that's absolutely great to see. You're talking to a room of converted people,
that's
really.
great. I'll call upon you again soon.
And it's good to see health and education linked. We have as part of our subgroup a health and education working stream with work on projects. So. And it's great to see research, which is so important, and it's great to see it delivered in communities of need, and I think that's really our mahi as well. So thank you again for your time.
Right. I'll pass you over to an expert up here on some of the details.
Thank you. We'll have just a minute break.